Lake Baikal lies quietly in southeastern Siberia, close to the Mongolian border. On a map, it appears almost ordinary, and from the shore it looks peaceful and even inviting. In winter it freezes into a vast sheet of ice, and in summer it mirrors the sky with near-perfect clarity. But Lake Baikal is not an ordinary lake. It is the deepest lake on Earth, reaching more than 1,600 meters at its lowest point. If Mount Everest were placed inside it, the peak would still remain submerged, and that depth defines everything about how the lake behaves. At the bottom, pressure is extreme and water temperatures remain near freezing throughout the year. Visibility can be misleading, and underwater currents exist where none should. Beneath the lake runs an active continental rift, meaning the ground itself is slowly pulling apart. Lake Baikal is not simply holding water, it sits on a geological wound. The lake contains nearly 20% of the planet's unfrozen freshwater, and its water is ancient, estimated to be more than 25 million years old. In winter, the ice becomes thick enough to support vehicles, and roads appear where water should be. People walk, fish, and camp on it, but Baikal does not freeze like other lakes. Temperature shifts, seismic movement, and internal pressure keep the ice under constant stress. In summer, the danger takes a different form. The water temperature rarely rises above 10 degrees Celsius, and cold shock can overwhelm a person within seconds, making breathing erratic and movement nearly impossible. Below the surface, light fades quickly, orientation becomes difficult, and even experienced divers report confusion. Compasses can behave unpredictably, and sound travels in unnatural ways. Despite this, the lake continues to be underestimated. Fishermen travel alone. Drivers take shortcuts across frozen sections. Tourists follow old tracks without knowing when they were last safe. And research equipment occasionally stops transmitting without clear explanation. When something does happen, it happens quickly. What makes Lake Baikal unsettling is not simply that people die there, because many environments are dangerous. What sets Baikal apart is how consistently indifferent it is. Survivors often describe the same experience, explaining that they followed rules, trusted conditions, and made no obvious mistakes, and then, without warning, the lake changed. Bodies are sometimes recovered days later, sometimes months later, and sometimes not at all. Vehicles sink vertically into depths beyond practical recovery, and search efforts are limited by weather, ice conditions, and the sheer scale of the lake. Some areas are approached with hesitation even by experienced teams. Official explanations usually exist, such as ice failure, hypothermia, disorientation, or equipment malfunction, and each explanation makes sense on its own. Yet Lake Baikal is rarely treated as a mystery. There are no warnings listing past incidents, no widespread restrictions, and no acknowledgement that certain areas behave unpredictably and life around the lake continues as normal. From a distance, Baikal looks calm and understood, but up close it feels different. The silence feels heavier, the space feels wider, and the ice feels alive beneath your feet. People who spend time there often describe the same feeling afterward. Not fear and not the sense of being watched, but a quiet awareness of how small they felt. Lake Baikal does not need myths to be dangerous. Its depth, age, and geography are enough, and the danger was always there long before anyone disappeared. It was not hidden, it was ignored. Winter at Lake Baikal does not arrive slowly, and when it settles, it takes control. Temperatures drop far below freezing and remain there. Wind strips heat from exposed skin in seconds. Snow hardens into dense layers, and the surface of the lake begins to freeze. From the shore, it looks familiar as water stills and ice forms, gradually thickening enough to carry weight. Locals monitor it carefully, measuring thickness and marking safe paths, because for the communities around Baikal, winter ice is not scenery, but infrastructure. Once the ice is thick enough, roads appear and vehicles cross the lake instead of driving around it. Supplies move faster and entire villages depend on these routes, which may look reckless to outsiders but are routine to locals. However, Lake Baikal does not freeze like other lakes. Temperatures shift rapidly. Currents continue to move beneath the surface. Seismic activity from the rift below subtly shifts the lake bed, and pressure builds invisibly between ice and water. When that pressure releases, it does so without warning. Cracks can form instantly and stretch for kilometers, producing a sharp and unmistakable sound. In some cases, the ice opens just wide enough for a vehicle to fall through, while in others it opens beneath a person and closes again moments later. Even experienced drivers misjudge conditions, and cars have broken through ice that appeared solid minutes earlier, with some sinking almost vertically into depths where recovery was impossible. Survivors describe confusion followed by immediate immersion in freezing water, where cold shock is instant, breathing becomes uncontrolled, muscles lock, and swimming becomes impossible within seconds. Methane adds another risk, as gas escapes from sediment beneath the lake and becomes trapped under the ice in winter. From above, these areas look no different from solid ice, and when failure occurs, it is complete. Spring is especially dangerous because surface ice may look solid while lower layers weaken, creating conditions where nothing appears wrong above while the structure below is already failing. Weather changes quickly. Vehicles cannot approach unstable ice. Divers face extreme cold and poor visibility, and in many cases help arrives too late. This is why winter incidents at Baikal often end quickly, because the lake does not allow time. Certain areas are avoided without explanation. Certain sounds are taken seriously, and outsiders rarely hear the full stories. When the ice disappears, Lake Baikal does not become safer. It becomes less predictable. In summer, the surface reflects the sky and waves move slowly, making the lake appear manageable from a distance. Boats cross it daily, fishermen work close to shore, and tourists swim, dive, and kayak, but the cold remains. Breathing becomes shallow and erratic. Muscles stiffen, coordination fades, and panic becomes physical rather than mental as the body stops responding. Many victims are strong swimmers, but that rarely matters. Light fades faster than expected, depth perception collapses, and orientation becomes unreliable, with even experienced divers reporting sudden confusion in clear water. Large sections of shoreline drop sharply into darkness, where a single misstep can place someone beyond safe recovery depth almost instantly. Winds can shift suddenly, waves can build faster than expected, boats can capsize, and rescue distances become a problem long before help can arrive. Search efforts reach their limits quickly as depth restricts divers. Sonar loses clarity, weather interferes, and time works against recovery. Official explanations exist for nearly every incident, yet investigators are unsettled by how often the same sequence repeats under calm conditions during familiar activity, with no warning before sudden loss. Those who spend time on the lake often describe a shift in awareness, explaining that distance feels wrong, silence feels heavier, and the lake does not acknowledge human presence at all. By summer's end, when tourists leave and fishing slows, the lake returns to stillness, and nothing appears changed on the surface. No scars remain, and no visible reminders exist, leaving only absence above water, while beneath it the depth remains unchanged, patient, and unmoved. Lake Baikal waits quietly in Siberia, indifferent to the people who cross its ice or dive into its freezing depths. Far to the west, in the heart of Moscow, another kind of danger waits: Lubyanka Prison, where fear is deliberate and inevitable. Lubyanka Prison sits in the center of Moscow, facing one of the city's busiest squares. From the outside, the building does not look like a prison at all. It looks administrative, heavy, official, designed to blend into the machinery of the state. That was intentional. The structure was completed in the late 19th century as an insurance company headquarters. It was never meant to confine prisoners. When the Bolsheviks took power after the revolution, they repurposed the building without altering its character. Lubyanka did not need bars to intimidate. It needed permanence. By the early 1920s, The building became the headquarters of the Soviet secret police, first the Chayka, then the NKVD, and later the KGB. Over time, it developed a second function that was never openly acknowledged. People were brought inside. Many were never seen again. The prison component of Lubyanka was not marked on maps. There were no signs, no official acknowledgement. To the outside world, it remained an office building. To those taken through its doors, it became something else entirely. Arrests often happened quietly. Late at night, early in the morning, a knock on the door, papers shown briefly. No raised voices, no explanations. Neighbors would see someone leave calmly, sometimes carrying a coat or documents, and assume it was routine business. Inside the building, the transition was immediate. Offices gave way to corridors that absorbed sound. Windows became rare. Time lost meaning. Prisoners later described the sensation of being removed from the city without ever leaving it. Lubyanka was not isolated on the outskirts of Moscow. It stood at the center of power. It reminded prisoners that what was happening to them was not chaos or excess. It was procedure. From the beginning, Lubyanka functioned less as a prison and more as a filter. People entered as individuals with names, professions, and histories. What left the building, if anything left at all, was paperwork. Charges were flexible. Evidence was secondary. Confessions were central. The building itself became part of the process, designed to confuse, exhaust, and isolate long before questioning even began. Those who passed through Lubyanka rarely described physical brutality first. They described silence, waiting, not knowing the time, not knowing the accusation, not knowing whether they would leave the building alive. And above all, they described the certainty that the building was not temporary. Once inside, Lubyanka did not feel like a place you passed through. It felt like a place that absorbed people. Lubyanka was not feared because it was secret. It was feared because everyone knew exactly what it was. And yet, from the street outside, nothing appeared unusual at all. This disorientation was deliberate and served as the first stage of control. Cells were small, sparsely furnished, and designed to prevent comfort rather than to restrain movement. Beds were often narrow or absent during the day, forcing prisoners to stand or sit for long periods. Lighting remained artificial at all hours, eliminating any connection to time outside. Windows, when present, were positioned too high or too small to provide meaningful reference. Silence was enforced inconsistently, which made it more effective. At times, complete quiet prevailed, broken only by distant footsteps or the closing of doors. At other times, noise was allowed to seep through walls in distorted fragments, voices, shuffling, or sudden mechanical sounds that could not be identified. Interrogation rooms were not physically dramatic. There were no instruments on display, no visible threats. The power of the room came from repetition and duration. Prisoners were often questioned for hours or days with minimal rest, moved between rooms at irregular intervals, and prevented from establishing any rhythm. Fatigue replaced resistance slowly and predictably. Interrogations followed no fixed schedule. Prisoners could be summoned at any hour, sometimes multiple times in a single day, sometimes not at all for long stretches. This uncertainty made waiting as exhausting as questioning. People described becoming afraid of the sound of approaching footsteps, not because of what might happen immediately, but because of what it represented. Food was minimal and inconsistent, sufficient to keep prisoners alive, but not comfortable. Sleep deprivation compounded this effect, as lights remained on and guards intervened whenever prisoners attempted to rest for too long. What made Lubyanka distinct was the emphasis on psychological pressure rather than overt violence. Prisoners were rarely told what they were accused of. When charges were mentioned, they were vague and changeable. Confessions were treated as administrative necessities rather than admissions of guilt, and the expectation was that one would eventually comply. The process was cumulative. Each day, without clarity, reduced the ability to resist. Each unanswered question eroded confidence in memory and judgment. Prisoners began to doubt their own recollections, their own intentions, and eventually their own identity. Records were kept meticulously, but access to them was absolute and one-sided. Prisoners did not know what was written about them, who had testified, or what decisions had already been made. Lubyanka did not operate as a place of punishment in the traditional sense. It operated as a place of transformation, where uncertainty replaced autonomy and compliance became the only stable option. By the time many prisoners left the interrogation rooms for the final time, the outcome no longer felt imposed. It felt inevitable. Lubyanka was not designed to function as a standalone prison, but as a central mechanism within a much larger system. Every interrogation, every file, and every confession fed into an administrative structure that extended far beyond the building itself. Decisions made inside its walls influenced arrests across the country, often weeks or months later. Interrogators were not improvising. They followed frameworks shaped by policy, quotas, and internal expectations. Confessions were not sought to uncover truth, but to complete a process. Once a narrative was established, it was adjusted until it aligned with institutional needs, regardless of accuracy. Prisoners were frequently confronted with documents they had never seen before, containing statements attributed to them or others. These records were presented as facts, even when they contradicted earlier claims. Challenging them was discouraged, not through threats, but through repetition and exhaustion, until resistance felt pointless. One of the most effective tools was isolation combined with selective information. Prisoners were sometimes told that others had already confessed, that their case was resolved, or that cooperation was the only remaining option. Whether these statements were true was irrelevant. Their purpose was to close perceived alternatives. Time inside Lubyanka was deliberately undefined. Prisoners did not know how long they had been held or how long they would remain. Days blurred together as routines shifted without explanation. This loss of temporal structure weakened the ability to plan, anticipate, or endure. Transfers in and out of the building reinforced its role as a processing center. Some prisoners arrived briefly before being sent onward to labor camps or execution sites. Others remained for extended periods without clarity about their fate. In both cases, Lubyanka functioned as the point where decisions became irreversible. The system relied on documentation more than spectacle. Files were updated continuously, stamped, signed, and passed between departments. Individuals were reduced to case numbers and summaries, making outcomes easier to manage administratively. Responsibility was distributed so widely that no single participant felt accountable for the result. This bureaucratic distance was intentional. It allowed the system to operate efficiently while minimizing personal hesitation. Interrogators focused on completion. Clerks focused on accuracy. Guards focused on procedure. Each role was narrow, and within that narrowness, harm became routine. Prisoners sensed this structure even if they could not see it. Many described the realization that they were not negotiating with a person but interacting with a process. Appeals, explanations, and logic failed because they were irrelevant to the mechanism at work. Once a confession was signed, its contents mattered less than its existence. Retractions were ignored. Corrections were recorded but dismissed. The document had fulfilled its function by confirming compliance, not truth. Lubyanka's power did not come from brutality alone, but from inevitability. The system moved forward regardless of individual actions, absorbing resistance without slowing. For those inside, the realization was gradual but unmistakable. The building did not decide guilt. It finalized it. What made Lubyanka especially enduring was that its influence did not end when a prisoner left the building. The paperwork generated inside it followed people long after release, shaping how they were treated, where they could live, and whether they could ever fully re-enter public life. A case resolved on paper was never truly closed. It remained active in archives, referenced quietly, revived when convenient. Former prisoners often discovered that freedom was conditional. Employment opportunities disappeared without explanation. Travel requests stalled indefinitely. Housing applications were delayed or denied. No reason was given, and none was required. The record existed, and its presence was enough. This administrative shadow was often more damaging than imprisonment itself. It created a permanent uncertainty that could not be challenged directly. There was no authority to appeal to, no document to refute, no clear accusation to address. The absence of clarity made correction impossible. Families absorbed this pressure as well. Relatives learned quickly which questions not to ask and which names not to mention. Conversations narrowed. Social circles contracted. People adjusted not because they were instructed to, but because experience taught them the boundaries. Lubyanka's records became a form of social memory, one that outlived the individuals who created it. Clerks changed. Administrators retired. Political language shifted. The files remained. They were reorganized, relabeled, sometimes partially erased, but never fully removed from relevance. In later years, when archives were selectively opened, historians encountered this legacy firsthand. Files contradicted one another. Confessions conflicted with timelines. Charges were vague or internally inconsistent. Yet the outcomes were definitive. Sentences had been carried out. Lies had been redirected or erased. The paperwork had done its work regardless of its accuracy. This revealed a deeper truth about the system. Lubyanka did not operate on certainty. It operated on momentum. Once a case began moving, stopping it required intervention from outside the structure, and such intervention was rare. Inertia favored continuation. This also explains why fear associated with the building persisted even during periods of political thaw. The architecture of control remained intact. Practices were softened, language was adjusted, but the underlying mechanism was unchanged. People understood that the system could reactivate quickly because it never truly shut down. Those who worked inside the building experienced this continuity differently. Many described their roles as technical rather than moral. They processed information, followed instructions, met targets. Distance from outcomes was reinforced institutionally. Reflection was unnecessary and often discouraged. Over time, this normalization blurred boundaries between legality and legitimacy. Actions were considered acceptable not because they were just, but because they were standard. Repetition replaced evaluation. Procedure replaced judgment. This environment produced a specific kind of authority. Not charismatic, not ideological, administrative. Power expressed through forms, schedules, and approvals rather than speeches or force. It was quiet, persistent, and difficult to confront directly. Lubyanka symbolized this authority precisely because it was unremarkable in operation. There were no grand rituals, no dramatic declarations, just a steady flow of people entering, being processed, and exiting into different futures. The absence of spectacle made resistance harder to sustain. Without clear moments of outrage, opposition fragmented. People adapted individually rather than collectively. Survival became personal rather than political. Even after the most intense periods passed, the building retained its gravity. Employees spoke of it carefully. Visitors noticed the atmosphere immediately. It was not fear in the theatrical sense, but a weight created by accumulated outcomes, by decisions made repeatedly without reversal. Lubyanka did not rely on secrecy alone. Its power came from familiarity. Everyone knew what it was for. Everyone understood what entry implied. That shared understanding reduced the need for explanation or enforcement. By the time someone reached its doors, the process had already begun elsewhere. Surveillance, suspicion, documentation, and categorization preceded physical detention. The building simply concentrated these forces into one location, where resolution became unavoidable. This is why Lubyanka remains difficult to separate from the system that created it. It was not an aberration. It was a logical endpoint, a place where abstract control became tangible, where policy became personal, and where the state interacted with individuals not as citizens, but as cases. And for most who passed through it, the most unsettling realization was not what happened inside, but how smoothly it fit into everything else. Lubyanka still matters because it represents a system that does not require violence to function, only continuity. The building stands as a reminder that control can be maintained through routine, documentation, and quiet compliance rather than spectacle. Its history shows how institutions outlive the ideologies that create them. Even after political shifts and public reassessments, the structure of authority that Lubyanka embodied did not vanish. Procedures changed, language softened, and visibility decreased, but the core logic remained recognizable. Systems built on classification and administrative distance adapt easily, because they depend on process rather than belief. Physical spaces carry memory in ways laws and speeches do not. Lubyanka's presence in the center of Moscow is not symbolic by accident. It reflects how power prefers proximity to normal life rather than separation from it. The building does not dominate the skyline, yet it is impossible to ignore once its history is known. What makes Lubyanka unsettling is not what it was, but how ordinary its operation became. It demonstrates how harm can be organized efficiently when responsibility is divided and outcomes are abstracted. No single action appears extreme, yet the cumulative effect is irreversible.